Good afternoon, and welcome to Fast Track Public Sector FinOps, presented by the Deloitte Center for Government Insights. We're excited to have you here today, and a large amount of our team, to talk more about what FinOps means for the public sector. We're going to start with a wide spectrum of content, starting with early introductory content, all the way through advanced content later on around reserved instances and reserved computing. We're excited to have some of our CSP panelists and others join from the government and public sector to talk more about how they can produce better results with FinOps in their organizations. For now, though, I'd like to introduce myself. I'm Chris Ostergaard, a Managing Director in our Government and Public Services practice here at Deloitte, and part of our larger FinOps team. You'll see me throughout the day today, but for now, I'd like to turn it over to two of my teammates in Ali and Derek to talk about what is FinOps. Enjoy.
Hello, and thank you for being here to talk about FinOps. I'm Derek, a FinOps practitioner here at Deloitte, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host, Ali. We're here to introduce everyone to, or remind everyone of, the FinOps basics. FinOps is an operational framework and cultural practice that maximizes the business value of cloud, enables timely, data-driven decision-making, and creates financial accountability through collaboration between teams. FinOps can be valuable to any organization currently operating in the cloud or thinking about a migration to the cloud.
FinOps involves teams across an organization working together to enable faster decision-making in the cloud, balancing cost, quality, and speed to optimize cloud investments. FinOps is about culture. FinOps brings together finance, engineering, and operations teams to manage cloud costs and drive accountability within an organization. But in order to understand and manage cloud costs, we have to understand how the cloud works and how resources are billed to our organizations. Fostering this collaboration and accountability maximizes the value of cloud investments. And just like any culture, we are continuously monitoring and analyzing our processes so that with each iteration, we improve practices over time.
That's right, and it all starts with a FinOps champion, and as Ali mentioned, involves buy-in from engineering, finance, and operations teams. As a FinOps champion myself, I know the path to FinOps maturity is a journey worth taking. A properly planned cloud migration requires more than just planning. We're going to need a FinOps champion who is interested in the cause and effect of cloud resource creation and management. Wouldn't you agree, Ali?
Definitely. Now you might be thinking, how do I get a FinOps champion? Champions are made when we bring in all types of personas, not just finance, and teach them how action or inaction can have major costs. Champions aren't all that are needed, though.
Exactly. FinOps is also about the process. We have to standardize processes to help rapidly inform data-driven decisions and enforce governance. We can use processes to optimize our reporting and leverage automation with tools.
Speaking of tools, FinOps can involve tools, but it's not just tooling. Tools can be helpful in a FinOps implementation by providing automation for manual processes and reporting. But on their own, tools will not save money. We need dedicated practitioners who can interpret reports and help identify cost problems and solutions. Tools can help us find anomalies, but they don't tell us the details on why things happened in the first place or how to prevent them in the future. This is where our FinOps champions can come in and help with solutioning.
And remember, FinOps is not financial operations. Although this is a common misconception because of the similarity of the terms, while it involves financial principles, FinOps specifically addresses the challenges and opportunities of cloud spending. And while tools play a role, FinOps is the perfect intersection of culture, processes, and tools. It requires changes in how teams operate and make decisions, emphasizing collaboration, transparency, and financial literacy.
You know what, Derek? FinOps actually utilizes the principles of DevOps in its emphasis on continuous improvement and data-driven decision-making. By adopting these principles, FinOps helps organizations manage cloud costs more effectively, just as DevOps helps organizations improve software development and operations processes. Both frameworks aim to create a more efficient, agile, and responsive organization capable of achieving its strategic goals.
Now, this might already sound like a lot, but don't worry. FinOps takes time to develop maturity at every organization. Crawl, walk, run is a metaphor used often for the gradual advancement of adopting and integrating FinOps practices into an organization. Initially, in the crawl phase, organizations focus on understanding the fundamentals of FinOps, setting up basic processes, and building a foundational knowledge base. The leading practice is to adopt FinOps early, That way, FinOps capabilities can mature along with an agency instead of perpetually trying to keep up. Early implementation of FinOps can create more business value and alleviate huge complexities once we're deep into a cloud journey.
And as we progress to the walk phase, we start to optimize these processes, implement more advanced techniques, and develop more refined strategies. And finally, in the run phase, organizations are fully proficient in FinOps, having established advanced and efficient processes, and are now positioned to innovate and lead in cloud financial operations.
This crawl, walk, run, phased approach allows for a manageable and effective adoption of FinOps, reducing the risk of overwhelming staff and ensuring a sustainable transition. Through each of these phases, we inform, optimize, and operate to ensure continuous growth of FinOps maturity in manageable phases.
Derek, maybe we get a little bit more specific on how to implement FinOps at an organization. Let's quickfire and share some common mechanisms for understanding and optimizing cloud costs. I'll go first. Have you ever thought to power down non-essential resources overnight? If we have resources that are not required to run 24/7, like a dev or a test environment, consider scheduling them to shut down outside of operational hours. This can lead to significant savings. In fact, one of our FinOps teams was able to reduce weekend compute spend by over 80% just by stopping resources not used outside the business week.
We can also explore using reserved instances or savings plans. Cloud service providers typically offer significant discounts to users who are willing to commit to long-term usage of their services. Though the public sector may have some constraints, they have to work within. By analyzing usage patterns through tools, we can purchase reserved instances or savings plans for the capacity we know we'll use, saving money over time. What else, Allie?
Another good first step is right-sizing our servers. One of the most common ways to optimize cloud costs is to right-size our cloud instances. This means aligning the capacity of our cloud servers to actual usage. Cloud service providers offer a variety of instances that can be tailored to the exact needs of our workload, helping to avoid paying for underutilized resources. For many of our FinOps teams, right-sizing efforts have resulted in an average of 20% reduction across compute and database spend. Any others, Derek?
Yeah. Implementing a tagging strategy for new and existing resources. Cloud tagging enables detailed tracking and reporting of cloud costs. We can dive into tagging in a second, but by assigning specific tags related to cost centers, projects, or business functions, organizations can gain deep insights into how the cloud budget is being spent.
That's right. And while I'm sure organizations would love to implement all of these steps right away, often FinOps teams are brought in after a mess is already made, which increases the workload. Derek, what advice can you give on how to manage all of this?
As I just mentioned, a good first step would be to implement a tagging strategy utilizing tag templates to keep the pile of untagged resources from growing. We'll need a FinOps champion in leadership to spread awareness that tagging is a priority and to show the negative impacts of not creating resources with correct tags. With one of our federal clients, we recently implemented an enterprise-wide tagging strategy and reported that all net new resources created have all required tags. By adding things like a system tag, we can tell exactly what systems incurred which costs and why. We noticed that monthly reporting on the percentage of the in-compliance and out-of-compliance resources will also help to stop the pile from growing. Nobody likes when their servers land on the naughty list.
That brings us back to the collaboration component. Back-tagging requires the support of multiple teams. We'd need support compiling the list of resources that need tags and identify what tags they need. We have to be sure to clearly define what resources require which tags so nothing is left for teams to misinterpret. If there is a set of tags that are low-hanging fruit, always get them done first. This will help us get a quick win with the program, showing the value that we can get from tagging.
And Allie, this is where our tools come in. Scripts and automation can be our best friend when it comes to back-tagging resources.
And finally, if you're really making headway, start to gain awareness of unused resources that are not deprecated, like deleting block storage. Don't forget about storage and other resources that can be left behind after deprovisioning a resource. We have found that when a compute resource, such as a VM, is terminated, oftentimes the storage associated with it can linger on and incur costs. And nobody likes paying for things they don't use.
True. Wow, Allie, we've covered a lot, By implementing these leading practices, such as removal of associated storage and backups when a resource is decommissioned, in our last example, we ensure that cloud costs aren't bloated with unnecessary spend.
I think we've given teams a good overview of how to get started with FinOps and perspective on where to begin.
I agree. Let's pass it over to John and Amanda to get more granular on FinOps in the public sector, and then stay tuned for our next panel to hear more about FinOps in action.
Thank you for joining us.
Hello, I am Amanda, a FinOps professional, and this is my colleague John, a FinOps practitioner. We are so excited to have you join us today. I have a couple of questions to get us started. Have you ever tried to apply commercial practices to public sector projects? Did you find that they focused a bit too much on profit or were more fast and loose with a budget than you're comfortable with? Just like with other types of tools and practices, not everything in commercial FinOps is a one-for-one application within our unique ecosystem. So, let's discuss some of the unique obstacles public sector FinOps faces that requires tailored solutions.
Perhaps the most obvious obstacle for the public sector is the need to contend with a myriad of specific rules and regulations unique to our agencies or organizations. These can often lead to complex twists and turns in operational strategies. In addition to all the rules, public sector often deals with a lack of agility. While this is partially due to the various laws that apply to government agencies and organizations, there is also a technical element. Workloads may be siloed, disparate, and operating on legacy software, making it difficult to have a single, efficient plan of action that encompasses an entire network system. But thankfully, implementing a FinOps framework can help address some of these technical obstacles.
For instance, employing FinOps frameworks like stakeholder communication plans can significantly help with collaboration between offices, branches, and departments. Also, creating a standardized FinOps tagging strategy and resource lifecycle governance can create a foundation for data transparency that allows agency-wide identification of legacy software and applications that can be modernized with a unified approach. A tagging strategy can also be a way to define certain terms and obtain stakeholder agreement on what a specific term means. And from a procurement aspect, centralizing the cloud procurement process, even with siloed networks or environments, can have many benefits, from rate optimization to centralized cloud governance and cloud account management. However, public sector's agility issues can also extend into approval requirements and validation processes. Right, John?
Oh, yes. Frequently, multiple policies and procedures are used to validate that every requirement complies with the relevant rules and regulations. In many cases, these procedures are holdovers that were put in place before the modern technologies of today even existed. Many government organizations are currently focusing efforts on finding innovative ways to optimize their existing processes to increase both speed and efficiency. For example, AI and machine learning services are being used to reduce the manual tasks required to process the various forms and applications that support existing regulations. In some situations, this has seen a 10x increase in processing speeds.
But introducing new technologies into processes can increase costs and may add stress to an agency's budget. A careful balance is needed between the cost of new tools and the value gained from increased efficiency. This can be tricky to evaluate, as by nature, public sector is not profit-driven and will need to use different metrics than a commercial organization to determine business value. Simultaneously, agencies are accountable to the public in a way that private sector is not. Public sector must focus on what benefits the citizens when making decisions, instead of making choices based solely on efficiency or cost. The ROI for process improvements needs to be prioritized based on greatest mission impact. Applying FinOps practices for establishing unit economics can help identify the key metrics that tie back to an agency's mission, which we can use to set our standards for success. By using these metrics, we can see which mandates and policies need revised approaches to optimize mission success.
If our targeted process improvements require modernization, employing a FinOps practice prior to implementing new technologies will help identify and evaluate the costs ahead of time. However, FinOps is iterative by nature and can be started at any stage of a cloud's implementation or operation. Making incremental changes and addressing the most significant optimization opportunities through each FinOps cycle can have a significant impact, as well as create the foundation needed to track the effectiveness of the improvements through relevant business value KPIs.
Yes, and to extend that list, public sector FinOps is unique because of the way that budgets are set far into the future. Imagine buying a new house and needing to predict what you will spend on utilities and repairs, not just for this year, but 3 years from now. You might not have even moved in yet, but you will be held accountable to the budget you set now for the next several years. It is a difficult structure to support using rapidly developing technologies. Having a FinOps practice in place can help catch runaway costs before they lead to a disastrous surprise bill at the end of the month. And catching these in time is crucial for the public sector, as it could cause costs to exceed the budget and breach appropriation laws.
But FinOps doesn't just provide reactive options for setting and maintaining a budget. We have several planning capabilities and practices, one of which is forecasting. According to a 2024 analysis conducted by the FinOps Foundation, accurate forecasting of spend is one of the top 3 priorities identified by study participants. Forecasting clouds several years out, and the criticality for that forecast to be accurate is a key difference between commercial and public sector FinOps. Given the importance of forecasting, we should focus on some of the complexities and nuances that go into it. Amanda, would you mind taking us through what the forecasting process looks like?
Of course. Overall, forecasting practices should include leveraging detailed historical data and advanced analytics that enable agencies to make data-driven decisions, identifying potential financial risks and uncertainties, providing opportunities to devise strategies that mitigate negative impacts, and consider the cloud landscape in a few years by talking to engineering and security teams and developing a roadmap for cloud. Forecasting is a versatile tool that can be used to accomplish multiple different goals. Our primary goals will determine how we shape our forecast and the impact it may have on our cloud planning and operations. For instance, are we using it to inform budget proposals? Or to obligate funds to a CSP or reseller for a given period? Or to ensure we stay within budget and to course correct if we get off track? The reason why we need to forecast could inform the type of forecast we create. While using historical spend is a great way to get started with building a forecast, that alone won't provide the accuracy agencies need to be more agile with spending.
Very true. Additionally, what do we do when there isn't historic spend to base a forecast from? The good news is cloud providers offer robust tools and resources to estimate cloud spend. The bad news is that it can be very difficult to understand what details these calculators need and how to obtain this information from the project. We need to leverage technical resources, partners, and cloud service providers to arrive at an estimate that everyone agrees on and understands. Public sector forecasts also need to account for different factors than for-profit businesses. Rather than simply using supply versus demand to optimize costs, we need to incorporate our organization's missions and goals into the calculation to determine which cloud services and available options provide the best business value for their costs. Amanda, how would somebody approach building a forecast?
There are 4 common forecasting methods that we can apply depending on our forecasting goals. Frequently, we will use a combination of these methods to account for all of our various cloud considerations. Simple forecasting only uses the spend from the previous month to project the spend for the next month. For some stable cloud environments with little variation in workloads or transactions, this may be adequate. A trend-based forecast method incorporates the % growth of a system or service into future projections. This can also help identify possible anomalies in a forecast later if actuals deviate from the trends. Driver-based forecasting considers specific seasons, cycles, or event periods where we may experience especially high or low demand, such as during open enrollment or tax season. Or when launching or migrating a new product or system, the net new workload forecasting method can be used to ensure that additional costs are covered.
So we have our goal set and we understand that different methods may be needed. Now, the first step to forecasting is understanding our current cloud state beyond the summarized spend value. A full inventory of the services and usage over time is needed, along with granular details about the workloads that extend beyond just resource metrics. For example, what operating systems are in use? Are they BYOL or part of the cost of a virtual machine? What unit of measurement is used for billing? What is the cost driver for a service? Is it the CPU, memory, storage, or maybe transactions? What type of policy or requirements are in place that might affect cost? For example, how long are data retention policies? Depending on the type of data, public sector often has different requirements for storing, securing, and retaining data that could affect a forecast.
One other note about using historic data as a foundation for forecasting. Just because it is based on actuals doesn't mean that spend is good spend. Don't forget to review and ask questions on if the spend that we're seeing makes sense for the service and for the application. There could be opportunities to reduce cost and optimize. If the technical teams implement these changes, they should also be baked into our forecast. Also, other FinOps practices weave together in this framework to provide additional support, like having a fully realized tagging strategy, which will make it significantly easier to pull cost and function data to get a complete picture of our cloud. If the data is clean, it will provide a solid forecasting foundation for the current environments, services, and spending. Sound a little overwhelming? Remember, a key principle of FinOps, cross-team collaboration. By starting forecasting conversations early and establishing a culture where all teams have a part to play in cloud costs, we can mitigate a lot of the stress of creating a forecast in a silo.
Excellent point. Once the forecasting foundation has been built, we have the difficult task of collaborating with other teams to refine details that cannot be obtained from historical numbers. How often a forecast is reviewed and updated may vary depending on who requires it and what it is being used for. However, the leading FinOps practice is to review and update at least quarterly, if not monthly. Unlike with on-premise procurements, cloud spend can be much more fluid. By evaluating our spending against our forecasts on a monthly or quarterly basis, we're more likely to see if we are on target with the budget and be able to course correct if not. Reviewing the forecast as a collaborative effort with the other teams will help to foster accountability and awareness that cloud spend is something everyone is responsible for.
Keep in mind that each team has something to contribute. Leadership teams can provide timelines of current and upcoming projects. For instance, the expected start and end dates of non-production environments, an upcoming workload migration, or a new disaster recovery requirement. Finance or contracts teams can provide information on any discounting programs that will be utilized. This is another opportunity for cross-team collaboration. Often, contracts may have negotiated a specific pricing or deal for certain services, but if engineering doesn't know, they may not utilize it. Similarly, speaking with engineering prior to negotiations can ensure that if there are heavily used services, they provide a greater weight in negotiations.
And also, engineering teams can provide a bill of materials and cost estimate for the resources planned in upcoming projects. A FinOps practitioner can assist here by obtaining the more technical details of the bill of materials and turning it into a cost estimate. The information collected from these teams will help increase the accuracy of a forecast, and having an accurate and well-maintained forecast can be very useful if the budget ever needs to be defended.
The fact is, sometimes actuals will exceed the forecast, or the forecast may exceed what was budgeted for. This will always cause friction from a budget standpoint. However, regularly reviewing the forecast can help identify the cause of these deviations and allow for corrective actions to be made before it becomes a problem.
Yes, exactly. We can see the story in the data. Maybe a deviation exists because we are completing a migration sooner than anticipated, which is driving costs up sooner than expected. While the increased costs would be unforeseen, the successful early migration of a system is a valid and good reason for the unforeseen spend. It could be because a new requirement or a software application or a process needed to be implemented and the increased resources were not in the budget. Or it could be that something is just taking longer to implement than expected. In any use case, the understanding our cloud forecasts, what went into it, and how the environment then continues to act, as planned or unexpectedly, can be a huge tool for defending a budget.
So, let's say we're sold on tracking our forecast and actuals more often than annually. How do we measure forecasting efficacy? Setting up KPIs to measure the variance of actual spend to the forecasted spend is a great way to track the quality of our forecast and show when our model needs to be adjusted. For public sector, one of the most difficult parts of forecasting is predicting the future spend and available budget. The FinOps team can work with the other offices and departments to build KPIs around spend baselines for individual projects, cost, reduction targets, or ensuring our commitment-based discounts are being fully utilized. Monitoring these KPIs will be a key part to tracking the accuracy of our forecasts.
And there's that accuracy word again. KPIs, clean data, good communication, and tagging. It all works together to improve our forecast accuracy. But why is that so important? Well, both federal and state agencies face a unique challenge with budget appropriation laws that regulate when and how money can be spent. Many of these laws will only appropriate funds for up to a year and will only allocate more funds if an option year is granted, which injects a degree of uncertainty into any forecasting we do. While this will mandate an adjustment of the forecast each fiscal year, having an accurate forecast in place allows the public sector to quickly pivot and adapt to any changes that are made to funding.
Wrapping up, let's say we have employed FinOps practices and we have a clear picture of our current cloud and future growth. Now, the forecasting process will combine these records with project and application projections to help us understand how service and resource usage will impact spending and additional business value.
Developing a cost-conscious culture in the public sector can be extremely helpful, as the combination of mandates, laws, and regulations that control how funds are spent can create a rigid budget structure. Having solid FinOps forecasting practices in place can alleviate many of the cost uncertainties cloud environments may experience. Thank you for joining us as we explored a few of our public sector factors that affect FinOps practices. Next, let's hear some practical examples. We'd like to welcome several public sector FinOps champions for a discussion on how they've implemented FinOps at their organizations.